Hello, and welcome to Cook County TAP's webinar, Harnessing GIS for Lead Service Line Replacement, Ensuring Compliance and Community Trust. We're delivering this presentation to you today in partnership with Baxter Woodman Consulting Engineers. Here's the team that will be presenting today. I'm Ruth Kersey, Senior Project Manager at Elevate, a nonprofit dedicated to making sure everyone has access to clean and affordable heat, cooling, power, and water in their homes and communities. I'm also the project manager for Cook County TAP, and my background is in public health. For much of my career, I've been dedicated to reducing lead exposure, especially for children, which explains why I'm here speaking with you today. I'm pleased to be joined by Kaitlin Wright and Madisyn Amoral of Baxter Woodman Consulting Engineers to provide valuable insight on using GIS effectively for lead service line replacement. Kaitlin is a licensed infrastructure project engineer at Baxter Woodman in Crystal Lake, and she's part of Baxter Woodman's water distribution and sewer collection team, working closely with a wide range of clients on their infrastructure needs, focusing strongly on lead service line replacement programs locally and in other regions of the country. Madisyn is an engineer in training in Baxter Woodman's infrastructure department out of the Chicago office. As a part of the water distribution and sewer collection team, she works with a wide range of clients on their infrastructure needs, focusing on lead service line replacement programs and water main design. Welcome to Cook County TAP, Kaitlin and Madisyn. We're looking forward to your presentation. So here's an overview of today's agenda. We'll start with a brief update on Cook County TAP, what it is, some new resources recently posted, and a quick survey of what you'd like to see from us. I will also touch on the Lead Care Cook County program, which Cook County TAP is a part of. Then I'll throw it over to Kaitlin and Madisyn for their presentation on GIS and lead service line replacement. And I had the pleasure of seeing this presentation at WaterCon this year, and they do a great job of highlighting the power of GIS to help with lead service line replacement, which is why we've invited them here today. So this webinar is scheduled to end at 3:15, but we'll stay on until all questions are answered. So let's start by checking in with Cook County TAP. So what is Cook County TAP? Cook County TAP is a resource hub designed to accelerate healthier water in Cook County communities. It's free technical assistance with the aim of helping municipalities develop lead service line replacement programs and implement water affordability best practices. We provide resources you need to create affordable and effective initiatives that reduce lead in drinking water and decrease residential water costs, from starting a program and securing funding to encouraging participation from residents. The result is intended to be a well-designed program that will improve the health and well-being of your community. It's funded by Cook County using American Rescue Plan Act funds and administered by Elevate. Cook County TAP regularly updates our website, posting and sending newsworthy and timely information on lead service line replacement and affordability, as well as continuing to engage the Cook County community to research best practices and lessons learned and share our findings through Cook County TAP. In 2025, we hosted a series of webinars to help develop and fund a robust lead service line replacement plan. And our first newsletter is coming out soon. It's called From the TAP, and we'll highlight their important news and lead you to additional resources. So what you're seeing on your screen here is the top portion of the landing page of Cook County TAP. At the top, you see a drop-down menu for lead service line replacement, and next to it, one for water affordability. We'll post new information to each regularly, so plan on stopping by often. We recently added an interactive state revolving fund scoring map to the lead service line replacement resources page to provide you with guidance when deciding which census tracts to include in an SRF application for lead service line replacement funding. The map shows the scores for Illinois census tracts based on the scoring methodology defined in Illinois Administrative Code. And that's 35 Illinois Administrative Code, section 663.345, if you're keeping track. And the higher the census tract loan priority score, the more likely a project is to secure funding. So you can use this map to see which census tracts you should be including in your lead service line replacement application for SRF funds. It's also just a really interesting map to look at and kind of see where your census tracts fall against, and you can compare them against others. So go to our website, cookcountytap.org, go to the lead service line replacement dropdown resources page, and you'll find the map there. Here are a few announcements I wanted to also share with you today. First, there's currently funding available through the Illinois State Revolving Fund for creating a lead service line inventory, which can include funding a GIS subscription, which is why I wanted to mention it here to you today. These funds will be available until they run out, with most awards in the $20,000 to $50,000 range per applicant. And Cook County TAP will send out this information as part of the First from the TAP newsletter, or you can also find it on our website on the funding page. The Illinois EPA also sent out letters in April and again in May to community water supplies requesting a list of all schools and childcares be submitted to them no later than May 15th, 2025. This is in anticipation of the fact that we are going to have to sample for schools and childcares for schools going forward and childcares going forward as part of lead service line, the lead and copper rule improvements and revisions. So Cook County TAP sent out links to the letter and also to an inventory template. So if you didn't receive it yourself, you can always look at our newsletter for that information. And we also will have a link to our newsletter on our website. So here's where to go to find out more information about Cook County TAP. You can go to cookcountytap@elevatenp.org and send us an email. You can give us a phone call at 773-269-4065 or go to the website cookcountytap.org. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned Lead Care Cook County, which Cook County TAP is a part of this larger countywide effort, and it's again called Lead Care Cook County. It's also funded by the Cook County Bureau of Economic Development using ARPA funds, and this program is tasked with removing lead service lines from childcare facilities throughout suburban Cook County. I'd just like to take a few moments and give you some details on that because I think it's important for this audience. Here's the high-level details about Lead Care Cook County. First and foremost, this is a program that is entirely free for any child care, either licensed, home, or center, or even license exempt, located anywhere within suburban Cook County. And the program provides all plumbing activities to remove a lead service line and any restoration needed both inside, such as repairing drywall, or outside, such as restoring disrupted landscaping. Lead Care Cook County is looking for partners within municipalities to get child care providers enrolled in this program. And the program can help municipalities meet the state and federal requirements to prioritize high-risk facilities in replacement planning. For more information about collaborating to get your child cares in your community signed up for Lead Care Cook County, go to info@leadcarecookcounty.org and shoot them an email. You can also go to their website at leadcarecookcounty.org. And these funds must be used by the end of 2026 with the final enrollments accepted no later than June of 2026. And we don't want to send any of these funds back to DC. We want to make sure we keep them here to protect our children from the impacts of lead and water. So do reach out to them or contact child care facilities within your area that could participate in the program. So with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Kaitlin Wright from Baxter Woodman to start us off on GIS. So take it away, Kaitlin.
Awesome. Thank you, Ruth. Let me get the screen up here. Wonderful. Ruth, can you see my screen?
Perfect.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be diving into how best to harness your GIS for lead service line replacements, ultimately with the goal to ensure compliance and community trust. I'm Kaitlin Wright with Baxter Woodman, and I have Madisyn Amoral with me here today as well. And thank you again, Ruth, for bringing us in. We're excited to be working with Cook County TAP on this. So let's get started. Just as a quick overview, the intent here this afternoon is to dive into what sort of service line documentation needs you will need to be providing, as well as maybe things you're not thinking about, a general overview of GIS, and how you can then use that GIS to build a smart inventory with the ultimate goal of facilitating your lead service line replacements. Now, I always like to take a step back, and I think it's really important to think about all the different regulations and regulatory agencies we're navigating. I imagine most all of you are familiar with these agencies at this point in time, but we do have Illinois Department of Health and their Illinois Plumbing Code, as well as IEPA's Lead Service Line Replacement and Notification Act, US EPA's Lead and Copper Rule revisions, and then maybe some local ordinances that you're navigating. And each one of these entities have their own documentation requirements. So underneath IDPH, they're really looking for, did that property want to participate when you're doing a lead service line replacement? Or did they refuse access? And if they refused access, did you document that? When was that? What was the date? Did they execute an IDPH waiver? Did you get that signed? As well as, are you using a licensed plumbing contractor to perform this work? So those are all items that IDPH is looking for a community to be documenting. Now, when we shift over to IEPA and the Lead Service Line Replacement and Notification Act, there's a variety of things here that we need to be documenting as we're doing lead service line work. So this might include your sample site number. If a particular facility is deemed high risk, when was that service line installed? Do you have a relative date? Do you know how you determined the material of a particular location? What was the source of that information? Do you know the material of a gooseneck or a connector or pigtail, whatever you might call it internally, as well as the material of the public side and private side of each individual service line? What's that entire classification of your service line? And when we start thinking about notifications, when did you provide a notice to lead? Did you do your construction notices? When was the service line replaced? And ultimately, what did you replace that service line with? So those are things that IEPA is looking for when we start thinking about lead service line documentation. Under US EPA, the lead and copper rule revisions, not only does that require basically everything we just went through for IEPA, but they have additional items they're looking for really focused on the sampling side of things. So when was your sample taken? What was the result of that sample? In the event that you had an exceedance at that individual home, did you have to do find and fix requirements? And if so, what was the location of that? What were the results of that find and fix? Water quality parameter sampling. So that's again nested underneath find and fix efforts. What was the location of that sample? What were the results? Same with annual notifications, the date in which you are sending those out. And then when you are having to distribute a picture or point of use filter, what was the date that was delivered? So those are things that US EPA is looking for in addition to all of that material information and notification information we covered underneath IEPA. But then there's everything else, right? So that's what the regulations are looking for, but there's a lot of things that you as a community might be managing to maintain all the different operations. So just think about operationally within your water system. You might be maintaining your meter size, the age of that meter, maybe the transponder number, the location of that meter. You might be tracking the service line size. Has there been service leaks at that particular property? Is that property planned for work in the future? If you are doing replacements and you've got some sort of hold harmless agreement or access agreement, are you tracking when that was executed? If you've got more kind of local permits that you're needing to maintain underneath that purview, you're probably trying to track the property owner information, contractor name that's performing the work, what their license number is, the date that work is completed, was an inspection completed, what were the outcomes of that inspection, who completed that inspection. And then you've got your billing information. Is the billing address might be different than your property address. This is a rental property. You might be billing information somewhere else. You might be tracking replacement costs, as well as if there's a cost share program, what's the status of that? Is someone paying? Have they become delinquent on their payments? What kind of payment type are you receiving? Was it a check that was issued? Are you doing credit card statements, things of that nature? So there's a lot of different data here that a community is managing for a single property. And if you have a couple hundred, thousands, tens of thousands of service lines in town, all of this is a ton of information to maintain. And this is really where you could be using Excel, you could be using different Excel spreadsheets to do this. But we really find that GIS becomes an incredibly useful tool in terms of maintaining all of this data in one centralized location. I don't know about you, but when I think about GIS, there's a few GIS staff members that I work with closely, and they are wizards. They tend to just make things happen in the background. And I'm very thankful for them, and they can visualize data and think of things that I'm not privy to. But you might just think, when you think GIS, you might think of a mapping system. Maybe you're thinking of Google Maps, or maybe you think of that pile of paperwork that you need to get into GIS, but it's just kind of sitting in the corner of your desk right now. In any case, at the end of the day, GIS is a system that's used for collecting, managing, analyzing, and ultimately visualizing that data, and is used to help us understand those relationships and trends in the locations of the assets that you're maintaining. And I think a lot of times, at least I know when I went into it, I viewed GIS as just this entity for a map. Like, where's your water main? Where's your sewer? There's a lot more power to this. And if you search where GIS is used, it literally has thousands of different applications. I thought it was really interesting that EMS, dispatch are actively using GIS. There's street cleaning and snow routes and waste collection. So it doesn't just have to live as a tool for mapping those pipes in the ground. There's a lot more power to this application. So with that, I'm going to pass this over to Maddie, and she's going to take us through how to start building that smart GIS inventory.
Thank you, Kaitlin, and thank you, Ruth, for having us today. I will be touching on how you can take your inventory in Excel and put it into GIS to create what we're calling a smart inventory. So the first step is to gather your existing inventory and find whatever the latest and greatest is in Excel, and that'll be the basis for the inventory in GIS. Then we'll talk about how to obtain GIS software and what softwares are out there. Then we'll get into actually building out that inventory and creating some initial maps and collection tools for your staff and for residents. And then we'll also get into what the crux of GIS is, which is the ability to continually improve your inventory. This will be important when we have to verify service line materials under LCRI. And then we can also create different mapping dashboards with different purposes that allow us to communicate with the public and with the board. And we can also integrate a lot of that support documentation that Kaitlin touched on earlier. And then as we begin to ramp up our lead service line replacements, we'll want to improve that inventory and keep it up to date. So the first step is to find where inventory exists today. So I'm guessing this spreadsheet probably looks familiar to at least some of you. So probably have a couple versions of this spreadsheet with different tabs in the bottom tracking all kinds of different information. There's a lot in here that's required by law, a lot in here that is just useful for a community to have. So there's a bunch of headers on here and different data that's important to keep track of. So we want to think about, where does this live? Is it in someone's email or on a spreadsheet or in OneDrive? And then how is this shared across the organization? So who is responsible for updating this? Is it a group of people? Is it just one person that's in charge of the inventory? Then also, how is this shared with the public? So all community water systems have to have their inventory available to the public, and large communities over 50,000 must have it available on their website. So it's important to think about how best to share this data with the public. Allowing the public access to this Excel spreadsheet, it's a lot of data for them to look at. So just want to consider how they're looking at that. And then this also leads us into selecting a GIS software. So there's a couple different softwares out there. Esri is kind of the industry standard, and that's what all of our clients use. It acts as a software as a service, so you pay an annual subscription fee. There's also QGIS, which is more developer-based and open source, so not the best way to track water service line inventories. And then there's also AutoCAD Map 3D, which is a CAD GIS fusion. It has more limited analysis tools compared to Esri. So just to touch on Esri, the base account is kind of what they call an online organization account. So this would include 2 licenses, the creator and the viewer. Then you could also add a mobile worker in order to access the field apps, which we'll touch on later. The cost to maintain these 2 licenses is about $1,000 a year. And then there would also be additional costs associated with either having internal staff update this or train them as well, or with hiring a consultant to manage and build this out. And then we have had success using the IUPA Lead Service Line Inventory Grant that Ruth mentioned earlier to help communities that did not previously have GIS to build out their inventory in GIS for them. So yeah. Then to touch on building out the inventory and creating some base maps and an internal process. So you'll start by uploading that authoritative data set into GIS. Then this is a good time to think about any additional data that you want to keep track of. So whether that's, where is that B box located, or where does the meter come into that, or where does the service come into the house? It's a good time to add those right when you're putting the inventory into GIS, but you can also always add those later. So you can consider necessary information that's included in that state spreadsheet, as well as just community specific information that's helpful to have. And then some of the benefits of GIS inventories include tracking the data integrity and accountability. So through GIS, you can see who's been updating the data and when it was last updated, which is super helpful. Then you can also track and analyze the progress and impact of your inventory, which allows you to communicate with your residents and with your board. Then you can also overlay your inventory with other GIS assets you might have. So in this map, you can kind of see the water service line inventory. You can also turn on and off different layers. So you could see like water main age or water main size, or things like that, which could be super helpful if you're planning a project. Then you can click on each individual point in here and it will pull up all those different fields that you're keeping track of. Then we'll talk about improving the inventory by empowering your field crews to update the inventory as well. So some things to consider when using GIS in the field. You want to think about your work order management. So how are those assignments getting assigned out in the field, and who is doing that work? And you'll also want to think about the contractors' documentation. Do you have language in the specs that calls for tracking new B boxes or something like that? Or is that something that you're interested in the future? And then you'll also want to think about what already exists in GIS to track and update. So here you can see kind of what the ArcGIS field maps looks like. So if you have that mobile worker license, you can download this app free from the App Store and log in, and you can update the data here in real time. If you're seeing, if replacements are being completed and you want to update that, these forms are highly customizable, and you can add as many or as few fields as makes sense for you and your staff. And then we'll touch on you can also create forms for your residents. So we've had a lot of success using these resident forms to collect material information. So you can have a lot of information in these forms. If you want to collect a lot of information, you can also host different educational materials, like either infographics that teach them about the different service line materials or where that service line might come in. Or if you want to add a video showing the scratch test or the magnet test, you can have that hosted in the survey as well. You can also have different languages of the survey. We've used Spanish in the past to just be able to engage with more residents, which is awesome. And then, so obviously we don't want the residents updating our authoritative data, so we've created a review portal. So this allows for us to go in there and make sure that what the residents submitted is all accurate and correct, and then we kind of approve that, and then it goes into the authoritative data. So there's just one kind of cautionary step in there just to make sure everything is verified and looking good. You could also set this up for the field staff if you have like a contractor working on GIS. You could also set up a review portal for them as well. And with that, I'll hand it back to Kaitlin to discuss facilitating lead service line replacements.
Thank you, Maddie. So this is where I start to get excited. I mean, this is the ultimate goal of the regulations, right? We want to get the lead out. We're going through kind of this painful transition period of where is lead in town, changes in sampling, all the additional notifications. There's a big lift that communities have been navigating right now and over the past year or two. And it's with the ultimate goal to remove lead. So the goal here is to kind of facilitate that effort out in the field, but using GIS as a tool to do it. And I'm going to start on the left here, and then I'll come back over to those images to explain a project and kind of how we utilize GIS. But there's a series of construction notifications that you're going to have to provide to residents. If you're not familiar with those, I'm going to highlight them briefly, but you've got to give them a 45-day notice prior to construction starting. There's a 14-day notice, I'm going to put asterisks on that, prior to work actually commencing or scheduled replacements. And then there's the day of replacement notice. So those mandated notifications need to be tracked and when they were submitted. IEPA is looking for copies of those. If you're doing a water main replacement project, we've seen them ask for them at the end of a project in order for you to get your operating permit. So knowing when those were sent out and having those on record is really a great thing. And you can track that data and even put copies of it in GIS if you wanted to. You might have project specific notifications that you're wanting to implement. You can do that in GIS. And by do that, I mean you can track that information. GIS is not going to send those notices out to residents. It does not work in that capacity. There's some long-term coordination efforts that can happen here. It allows you to start collecting resident contact information. So those surveys that Maddie was referencing before for inventories, we've now implemented those in advance of an actual replacement project. We have residents fill out a form, access it via a QR code or a link, and we're requesting their contact information in advance. We're requesting them to send photos in advance. We also are asking them kind of what their preference is for contact. Do they want to be emailed? Do they prefer getting a letter in the mail? Do they prefer a phone call? This is all useful information that feeds back to our construction team and the community before we start actually disturbing the ground in front of someone's house. It also will allow us to track that coordination history. When did we first reach out to those homeowners? Have we had homeowners that aren't responsive? And then there's some additional benefits here. It allows you to start getting a sense of kind of who your hard to reach residents are going to be. We've had times where we've been trying to reach residents for months on end and they're just not responsive. And that's something that communities are going to be navigating. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter how many notices you hand out or how many door hangers you put out. There are just some residents that really are going to be more difficult to engage with. And we're going to have to start thinking outside of the box to start getting that engagement with them. It will also allow you to track interior or restoration photos. So using that field app that Maddie was referencing before, our contractor and our crews can snap photos and associate that with a specific address. Same with those surveys. So we can have those residents submitting photos. And again, that's associated with a specific address. And through that process, it allows us to do a final material verification pre and post of that work for replacement. So on the right here, we have the Village of Lagrange's Brainerd Avenue Water Main Replacement Project. This went in the ground, gosh, it's been 2 summers ago now. Which time flies, but that project was in and of itself a complicated project. Just remove service lines and lead service lines from the scope of work right now. We had a railroad we had to go underneath. We had a school that we are right next to that we had to make sure that we weren't going to impact. So we were very tight on timing. They had a pet parade that happened the July 4th weekend. We were not allowed to start construction until after the pet parade. There were IDOT right-of-ways that we had to stay outside of the limits of. So just a very complicated project just to get the water main in the ground. A lot of other existing utilities we were navigating. But on top of that, there is roughly 150 water service lines within the limits of the project, and about 67 of those were suspected to be lead. So the map here that you're seeing shows a point for each individual service line. And that point had associated data with it. So our field crews could click on an individual property and gain contact information. Did they sign an IDPH waiver? Did they sign the access agreement? Have they paid for replacement? There's a lot of additional support information behind that point. But I want to emphasize the color coding here. Oops, I did something. Am I still sharing my screen, Maddie?
We can still
Yep,
see your screen, so
okay.
our everything looks good.
Great. Okay. We'll keep going there. So sorry about that. The color coding is really where the value comes in here. And it allowed us to understand just at a glance where any individual service line was, but more importantly, where the project was as a whole. So you can kind of see a difference in coloring if you move from north to south or top to bottom. And we have a lot of yellows and reds at the top. We have a lot of greens in the middle, and we have a lot of yellows and greens in the bottom. So the greens in the middle is actually great. That was when we took the screenshot of this, it was in the middle of the project, and we phased the project to actually start in the middle of the limits because we had to get the work done before school came back into session, and that was right in front of the school. So the green indicated to us that those service lines were complete. There are a handful of purples sprinkled in there, and those were residents who had declined to participate on replacing their lead service line or their portion of their lead service line. The village does do a cost share program, so they're paying for the public side, and then they are giving some financial onus back on the property owner and paying for the private side of things. If you move to that north section, you can see that there's a lot of yellow, which was great. That meant that we had received agreements from those property owners to go ahead and move forward with replacing their lead service line. They were going to participate in the program. But you also see some red. And that was an indicator for us that we had residents that still had not responded. They'd been notified, door hangers had gone out, we had been knocking on the doors. And this became really impactful for the village. The village staff were able to go into this dashboard, into this map, and they knew right off the bat kind of what was going on. And they were able to come out and assist with engaging with those residents. So there was some more hand-holding, some more encouragement. Having someone from your community engaging with you sometimes means more than having the contractor or the consulting engineer who doesn't wear the village emblem, that might not resonate as much. So the village had to come out, give some additional assistance there, but they knew they could see that effort was going on. And we were able to kind of transition that handoff to have them help on those communications in a smoother way. So again, just the power of being able to color code this. This was stuff that our resident engineer out in the field, he was just clicking on each point as the status changed, and he was able to update that live and make that change so that at any given point when the village needed to go in and understand what was going on, they had that visual cue. And one thing I want to emphasize here for anyone who doesn't have GIS right now, or maybe it's been really difficult to get your elected officials to buy in on, doing an entire system GIS. That can feel expensive. It can feel daunting. Using a smaller project as a pilot project is absolutely an acceptable way to start integrating this. We built out this map specific for this LaGrange project. LaGrange utilizes MGP. They do have a robust GIS, but we needed to track this data kind of separately initially to kind of keep this project moving and give our teams access. And so you can build out a GIS like specific to your water main replacement project, for instance, put that in the design contract, put it in the construction oversight contract, kind of nested in there. Instead of going to your elected officials and saying, we need GIS for, the entire town, and it's going to be an $80,000, price tag to do that. It does not have to be that to start by any means. So this is again where you can really start to pull all the pieces together. We've walked through the fact that you've got an inventory effort, you've got a replacement effort. I've alluded to the sampling throughout this process, and you can create customizable dashboards that reflect all of this. You can have an inventory dashboard, a replacement dashboard, a sampling dashboard. And what really becomes useful is you can have all these dashboards essentially nested within each other. I've got highlighted up in the right-hand corner there how I could gain access to the inventory or replacement projects or sampling just by a click of a button. It's going to bring me to a different dashboard, but it's looking at the same data. It's just going to be visualized differently. So this really allows you to manage what I'm going to call the entire life cycle of a lead service line. Obviously the intent is that that life cycle comes to an end. We're going to get rid of the lead service line, but it's really becomes a powerful tool. And these dashboards are incredibly customizable to the information that you want to see or you need to see. And there's things to consider with them. Your operations staff and admin staff are going to be needing different data. Doesn't mean that that can't all be visualized in the exact same dashboard, but maybe you've got a section that shows how much of the budget has been used this year for lead service line replacements. Maybe you've dedicated an X amount of dollars for assisting on private side replacements, and your billings department needs to understand, or finance department needs to understand how much of that has been utilized. You can create that so it's shown in the dashboard. Your elected officials are going to have a very different want and understanding of your lead service line replacement program. Understanding what's important to them is going to be critical when building out some of these interactive pieces. Same with residents. At the end of the day, they really want to know that they've got clean water. They want to know that their yard, if it's going to get torn up, gets put back. Same with the inside of their house. And they want as little disturbance as possible in their day-to-day life. And if it has to cost them something, how much can they afford it and how long do they have to pay it back? So being able to communicate that, show that information, show the status of the program overall across your entire community becomes really important and helps kind of bring that transparency to light. And then I do have regulatory agencies down here as a team member. I think right now, talking to a lot of different communities, I understand that we don't always think of the regulatory agency as the team member here. We've had a lot of changing regulations, and there's been a lot of growing pains with that process. But they are definitely part of the team and making sure that this happens. There's information that they need from us. There's information that we need from them. And thinking through those pieces really can help build that dashboard in terms of, how many lead service line replacements have you completed this year? How many new service lines have you identified this year? Did you get any waivers executed? Okay, how many? Which locations signed those? Same with access agreements, right? Who signed your access agreement? So all of that information, again, can get built out in different dashboards. And I'm going to run through a handful of these here. I want to respect time for questions. But an inventory dashboard really allows you to visualize that material and ultimately the trends that you're seeing in town. So you can see here in the middle, there's this particular community has a majority, actually, they have no known lead. They're in a great position. So, but they have a lot of copper, copper with lead solder. They've got some galvanized, but we're able to sense that trend of what's happening in town. It also allows for identifying what works in terms of engaging with your residents. So that resident information survey that we were referencing earlier, you can track when those responses came in. And that might seem like, more information than I actually need, but where it actually becomes helpful is you can see what resonates with residents. Did you send out just a notice? Well, maybe that's that first uptick that we see close to March. Maybe in April, you did some social media posts. All right, we got more engagement from residents on that. Maybe in July, you did door hangers. Okay, we got an okay response from that. It allows you to start getting a sense of what works in your community. And I'll say that every community is different. There are some things that work exceptionally well. And then there's things that don't. And even parts of town may differ. And so getting that sense is going to help you when you start getting to the replacements. And think back to that LaGrange example I was sharing earlier, where there's just some residents that are difficult to reach. But if you have a sense of knowing what things are working to engage with residents, you might implement that sooner than waiting later on in your project. It also allows us to really show your community efforts and staff efforts. So this is the same dashboard. I just turned on a different layer. And what you're seeing here is the green boxes in the map indicate where all of the city staff went and did an in-home inspection. And the purple indicates where residents responded with survey information, while the red indicates a resident responded requesting for an in-home inspection. This allows you to really communicate back to those elected officials and advocate for your staff, advocate for the program. Maybe you need to increase your budget this upcoming year. You still have unknowns. Your staff have done a ton of time, ton of boots on the ground, knocking on doors. You can show that. You can say, like, we hit this entire area. We still have, 10% of town that is unknown. But look what we did with what we had last year, and we'll be able to wrap the rest of this up this year. So that data can really help you advocate for your staff, advocate for your community as well. So then sampling, this is really where I wouldn't say like to focus our energy, but I think it's near and dear to everyone's hearts right now because we're all going through it. There's a lot of changes. I think on a daily basis, I'm talking to a community about sampling right now. So using GIS to start visualizing that is a really helpful tool. You can use it to track your different tier locations. And what I like with this is you're able to see what's the quantity I have in each tier. If you have plenty in your tier 1, who knew that having more lead service lines was going to help you? But in this scenario, it does become a bit more useful. That's good to know. And you can visualize where those tier ones are. And as that changes over time, that will be reflected in your dashboard. You can also use it to identify specific sample site locations. Where this ends up being more useful and where you can strategize with this a little bit more is when you think about those find and fix requirements. In the event that you have a property that goes over the action level, and you have to implement find and fix, you have to find another property that's within a half mile on the same size main in the same pressure zone to sample at. So making sure that you have that location or have that visually located is going to help you maybe start being strategic on where you want those additional sample sites to be. You can also use it to track and visualize your sampling results as those come in. That might help you with prioritizing replacements in the future. So one more dashboard here. I know we spoke through replacements with the Lagrange project, but I really think that this is where the power comes from. We're going to be going through a lot of replacements in the near future, and these type dashboards allow you to visualize the property status for each individual property. The dashboard you see here is for an Arlington Heights project. We just started this project this past week. So you see that there's a lot of residents that are in the responded category, but we do still show a handful that are shown as notified, responded being orange, notified being blue. So we still have residents, even though we've been reaching out to them since November of last year, that still have not engaged or responded back to our efforts to get a sense of, are they participating or are they not? I think that they'll understand that construction is underway as we start digging up the road for this water main replacement project. But again, this map allows us to understand kind of where we need to put those additional efforts and find different ways to coordinate with those residents. It also is going to empower our field crews. So they can click on an individual point. And again, that goes back to that field map application Maddie was speaking on earlier. And they are able to update all of this information on the fly. So there's some things that we've locked down. We make it uneditable out in the field just because it's more of like historical information, like what is the material suspected, the contact information, etc. But there's other pieces here that they're able to update, and there's a lot of content. There's more than this, but I didn't want to overwhelm the screen. So it gives our crews a lot of power to make those updates. They have an organized way of collecting the information and allows them to ultimately end up conveying that progress to the stakeholders. The village will have access to this. They can take screenshots and put this on their website. Our crews have access to it. I have access to it. It really is a great way to communicate across all the different kind of fields and make sure that we're all on the same page for a replacement project. So as I conclude here, I really think that public transparency is key to make sure that these programs run smoothly. At the end of the day, our most critical stakeholder is the property owner, right? We are working with hundreds of different stakeholders, and each one of them thinks that their property is the sole thing that you need to be worried about. And the regulations require us to provide notification, but outside of that requirement, I think it's really critical to make sure that we are engaging with residents, that we are finding new ways to encourage them to participate. And I don't just mean for replacements. I mean to get that inventory information. I mean to have them be a part of sampling. The more I talk to residents, the more their understanding of water is I turn on the tap and water comes out, and I'm happy with that. And the only time I'm going to engage with my community is A, if I'm not happy with the quality of the water, or B, I don't have water, or C, you raised my bill, or maybe I can't afford the bill this month. So in all of those instances, there's not necessarily a positive light with water, and we want to start having more positive conversations as an industry. So creating a more easily accessible way of just understanding the inventory will be just a stepping stone for that. As Maddie indicated, the inventory does have to be publicly available. Does not matter what size you are. When you get to 50,000 or greater, it does have to be accessible on your website. I am a huge proponent for mapping your inventory if the presentation does not indicate that. I think that this allows residents to understand a couple different things softly. They get to see the size of what you are providing. It's not just to their house. There's multiple neighborhoods. It changes kind of the scope of work. What I like to do with our maps is we set it up where individual points can be selected. So homeowner can either search for their address, or they can zoom in and select their address, and they'll get a pop-up that shares what is known. Is the village side copper or lead or galvanized? Is it maybe still unknown? What is the private side? So we share what information we have. You can also use this map in that pop-up if it is still unknown to link back to your survey if you have one. So a great way to capture those remaining unknowns. And it keeps that information publicly available, but maybe doesn't allow someone to take a screenshot and post it on the local Facebook feed and say, look at all the lead that's in town. Some communities really are passionate about color coding these points early on. So think back to those internal dashboards we were showcasing, where you could see where lead was, you could see where galvanized was just by the color of that singular point. You can do that on your public web map. My recommendation personally is that you hold off on doing that until you have a strong lead service line replacement project or program in play. And once that is in play, absolutely start showcasing this data differently. You can color code it based off of the material. You could color code it based off of the program year that replacement is going to happen. There's a lot of different ways you can showcase the exact same data and tell a different story to your residents. So I'm going to conclude here with just a few lessons learned, and then we'll open it up for questions. One thing I want to emphasize here is GIS is not limited to communities that already use it. As Maddie said earlier, as well as Ruth, we have utilized the lead service line inventory grant really as a means to start and help communities with their inventories, but we build it out in GIS because that's the easiest way for us to manage it. And so through that process, they are starting GIS or starting to have GIS when they might not have had it at all. So you don't have to have it. You don't have to have your entire system in GIS. You can start either with a small project or a very specific part of your system that would be a lot easier for you to manage in GIS, and just start there. You don't need an expert on staff to do GIS. You just need a champion. You need someone who's passionate about this, who wants to maintain the data, who's willing to go to webinars like this and learn on things that they need to do. And then there's plenty of other experts in the field that you can utilize and reach out to, but you just need someone on staff that's willing to kind of take this and start running with it. I do think it's really important to make sure you communicate the roles in managing your data. So what are your expectations on who's updating the data? And by that, I mean, do you have an expectation that your field staff, when they're out on a main break or a service line leak, is there an expectation for them to be updating data right then and there? My guess is probably not. But is there an expectation for them to either bring that back in within a set time period and either relay it to someone or update it themselves? Is there one single person on staff doing all of the updates, or is it a combined effort? So just make sure you understand what each person's role is, whether they're more of a viewer or someone who's actually editing that data. Establish an expectation for your frequency of data updates. You have heard Maddie and myself reference live data, and I'm doing air quotes again, or real-time data. Understand that GIS is only as good as the information that you put into it. I think people have heard the term garbage in, garbage out. If your expectation is that GIS should be updated weekly, that's great. If your expectation is that GIS needs to be updated annually, also great. Just understand when the last time that data was updated before you call it this is real-time live data. Because if it is, say, once a year that you're going in and making these changes, that's still okay. It's just maybe not what happened 6 months ago. And then at the end of the day, if you can note it, GIS can track it. So if it's important to you, important to your staff, don't just think about what the regulations require. Think about what's going to help you operationally fulfill this. GIS can track that. So the sky's really the limit when it comes to it. It's a very powerful tool. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch it over for questions.
Great. And we do have some questions, so perfect timing. I'm going to go ahead and take Kevin Lascola off of mute. So Kevin, if you're still there, I'm going to let you talk now and you can ask your question. I think you have to unmute yourself. There you go. We cannot hear you though. We still can't hear you. Okay, so if you are able to put your question in the Q&A panel, Kevin, maybe try that. I'm going to switch it over to Timothy Alund and see if we can get him to hear him. Go ahead, Timothy. Does not seem to be working. You're off mute on our end, but we can't hear you. I apologize for that. I don't know why, but we can't hear you. Maybe check your audio settings and we'll come back to you. So there's a couple of questions here. So Timothy, you're still off mute or on, yeah, off mute. So if you check your audio, there may be an issue there. I'll move on with another question. So one of the questions here is, what about information overload? So you did touch on this, and this question came in kind of a little bit earlier. But what about information overload? Is there any advice you can give for how to determine what data should rather than could be collected? Is there a process by which you decide on that? Yeah, any advice?
That's a great question, Ruth. Information overload definitely exists. I can speak from personal experience. I see Maddie smiling. I will say that when I started this journey of tracking inventories in GIS, I was tracking everything. And I had a drop downs for everything, and I was super excited. And then what ends up happening is when you get too many fields, A, you're not updating all of those fields when maybe you should be. B, if you have different people accessing that data, and again, that goes back to my comment about think about who's managing this data. I have a whole lot of staff who are going in and helping with inventories. Well, Kaitlin had her idea of what data should be tracked and what certain method. I'm trying to think of my exact example. When we're talking about, I'll do an exact example, the material classification and how you classify a service line and how you determined that material. I had a lot of different ideas on how we should be classifying that. So was it an in-home inspection? Was it tap records? Was it excavation efforts? Was it predictive analysis? There was like 7 other things I think I wanted us to track. Well, then I had an understanding of what that meant, but when my staff were going in to make updates, they didn't understand my understanding. So when you're building out GIS, I would strongly recommend that you bring everyone together that's going to be using this, your field staff, your admin staff, maybe some higher level operational staff. Make sure I would pool all the ideas that they say, hey, I need this, and create a need list and create a want list. Need, we should absolutely do. Want, we should absolutely talk through. What does that want actually facilitate? Is that want going to help you out in the field? Does it help you make real live time decisions? Or is it more of a, yeah, that would be nice to know, but it does not impact whether or not we are installing the service line right here, right now. There is a point where less is more in GIS, or at least when you're updating data, less can be more. So there isn't definitely a point where too much information exists.
One
Yeah.
thing I'll add is that not every category of data is relevant for every point. So it's not like every field needs to get filled out everywhere if it's not relevant to that point. So there are blanks in the data, which is okay.
Okay, so I just want to be respectful. It's 3:13. We have until 3:15. I want to be respectful of people's time, but we do have some more questions. So again, feel free to roll off at 3:15 if needed. We will be sending out a follow-up email with information for you about the continuing education credits, et cetera, but I'm just going to plow here along with the rest of the questions. So one of the questions also was about trial by fire. So this is an extremely powerful tool, GIS, which I think you clearly demonstrated here. There's just so much it can do. We use GIS to create our interactive map, for example, for SRF census tract scores. It can just do a plethora of things. And so my question to you, or the question that's posed here, I'm trying to summarize it, is it worth becoming familiar with GIS for lead service line replacement with the idea that you can then use this system down the road for other things? So have you seen folks, I guess, use it down the road after doing their, starting with lead service line replacement and then moving it into other realms that they have to manage? Yeah, I'll just stop there.
Yeah, we've actually worked with a lot of smaller communities that do not have GIS, and I guess you don't have to be a small community to not have GIS. We know some larger communities that also don't. I'm thinking of a community where we built out their lead service line replacement plan. We were assisting on that endeavor, and we were using GIS to build out exhibits. So we took their inventory data, which was in Excel, brought it all in to GIS. We're using that to then create our exhibits for their replacement plan. They ended up being able to use that to advocate back to their board. They're now moving forward in getting GIS for other utilities or for their water and their sewer. So a lot of times when I see communities who don't have GIS, it's not a want. It's not because it's not a want. It's more of, I don't have the funding, I don't have the time, I don't have the elected officials buy-in on this. They see the power of it. They see kind of, it looks cool. It'd be great if I had it, but we're fine without it. And starting at this more specific scale allows you to just get familiar with the software, and B, allows you to be able to then advocate up and say, hey, this was really useful for us. We want to bring in our water system next, or we want to bring in our sewer system next. It can be a piecemeal kind of stepping stone. And maybe you go through this process and you're like, yeah, no, we're still comfortable with pen and paper and our atlases, and that's the world we want to stay in. And that's okay too, right? You got to do what's best for you.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So just a couple more questions here. And again, roll off as needed, folks, and we will be following up with you with an email. So what are the main challenges in using GIS for inventorying water service lines? Is there a main challenge that you can point to?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's maintaining that data effectively for all of those different points. So, and by that I mean, so if you're doing a resident information survey, you get that resident response, you update the private side material, but you really should also maybe update the public side material if that's your methodology, and then you should maybe update your entire service line material classification. So it's making sure that there's a lot of data to update for each individual property and just setting up that process internally to make sure that's getting captured. Kind of goes back to that good garbage in, garbage out statement. GIS is only as good as the information that you put into it. So
Great. I think you may have answered some of these questions already, but I'm just gonna put them to you. So what advice would you give to organizations just starting to use GIS for lead service line replacement? I think, you've already said, think about what you want to collect, do it in baby steps, but is there anything else that you'd want to add to that?
My big thing is just bringing in the staff that are going to use it. It's really easy for me behind the desk to tell you what it should look like and create these dashboards. But that doesn't necessarily mean that what I am picturing as useful is going to be useful to the teams that are out in the field using it. So make sure you bring those key players in.
Great. I think that covers it. I will just put one last call out there for questions. Kevin Lascola, if you're still there and want to ask a question, please feel free to write it in the chat or write it in the question panel, either way. Otherwise, I want to say thank you to our hosts today. I'm sorry, I'm the host, so thank you to myself, but also thank you to Madisyn and Kaitlin for being here today. We really appreciate you being here. We will be, this presentation has been recorded. We hope to share that with everybody going forward. And then look for that follow-up email we'll be sending out as well. Always go back to Cook County TAP, cookcountytap.org, and check out for new resources. Again, that website is finally really up and moving, and so we are able to get more resources up quickly. Final word on funding. So obviously, Kaitlin and Madisyn have shown us that GIS is a very powerful tool. The state of Illinois has state revolving funds dedicated to lead service line inventory, and those funds can be used to get a subscription to a GIS service. So definitely look into that. And I'll send that information out with a link to where all that information is on the state's website in that email. So you will have that as well. So thanks everyone for attending. Thanks again to Madisyn and Kaitlin for being here. Thanks to everyone else, and we will see you again next time.